What's up guys, and welcome to the second part in my load balancing tutorial. So in this tutorial I'm going to go through the basic architecture that we're going to use and what actual physical service that we're also going to use. So this is the architecture that I recommend in a working environment. So what we have here is some kind of user right here, and in our example we're going to distribute an API that the user is going to consume. And so the setup would be like for example, like a web page over here that the user is consuming, and it's creating HTTPS requests. So this part right here, the first communication to the load balancer is going to be with HTTPS and SSL certificate and everything. So the first square right here is the first server that we're gonna be communicating with. So the user make HTTP request right here. Here is the SSL certificate on this server. This one that I call the load balancer, it has an Nginx server, and also as the DNS server that you're using, if you have a domain name, it's going to point to this server right here. So if you do a lookup on the IP address from the domain name, it's going to point to this IP address for this server right here, the load balancer. And the next important thing to realize is that we're going to have multiple instances of the application server in this case. You can also do replication, for example, on the database. That you can also have scalability right here in this end. In this tutorial, I'm not going to actually implement this at all. So you could use like AWS services for maintaining performant MySQL databases, and I don't know MongoDB clusters or replica sets or whatever, but that'll probably take the focus away of what we're doing right here. So this is not going to be implemented in this part. So you have to look that up elsewhere. But what we're going to do, we're going to replicate these servers right here. Server 1 and server 2 we're going to have. And the basic rule of thumb, if you do replication, is that you should have at least 3 instances of this stuff that you're replicating. So actually 2 servers is not enough for having proper uptime. So you should probably have 3 servers in a working environment. But since I want to keep this super simple, I'm just going to have 2 of them. And I'm going to call them server 1 and server 2. And but the communication between the load balancer and the servers, the application server that we're replicating, is going to be HTTP. And this is kind of important because there is no reason why you should have SSL communication between these servers, because the way you should set it up, for example, let's say that you're using AWS, you have 2 IP addresses, and I think on DigitalOcean you have as well, you have, I think it's called private networking. And what that means is that these servers are going to be on the same, you can think of it like the local network in your home that is going to be used in the same way that I will in this tutorial. So you cannot access these servers on that IP address unless you're in the same cluster, which these servers are gonna be. And that also means that you can set up a proper firewall on these servers, like one here and one here, that only accepts communication from this IP address right here. So there is not going to be any communication for the user to directly to these services. So all communication is going to go through the load balancer, and the load balancer in terms is going to do something called round robin, and it's going to alternate between these IP addresses. So like this one, this one, this one, this one, back and forth, is going to route them between them. And Nginx has really good mechanisms for doing this, which I'm going to show you later. So the important thing is that HTTPS between the user and the load balancer, HTTP between the load balancer and the server application service. So that's the 2 most important thing. And the third most important thing is also that these servers right here, server 1 and server 2, which I call the application servers sometimes. This shouldn't contain any state, because if you communicate with the load balancer, let's say the user makes a request like this, it ends up on this server right here. This server creates some kind of state that the user is going to assume is present. The next time it comes around, it's going to be routed to another server. Sometimes, I mean, it could be routed to the same, but probably not. So it's going to be routed to this server right here. And this server doesn't know anything about the state that was created up here on server 1 in the previous requests. And this is why we don't keep the state on these servers. And there are other alternatives to how you should deal with the keeping of states if you do a replication like this. And I'm not going to go through them in this tutorial. So if you have an application that have these kind of needs, you need to look elsewhere. So this is the basic setup, and more pragmatically, I have VirtualBox here running, so you can see I have the same stuff here. I don't have any database server or anything like that, or the DNS or something. I'm just going to use the IP addresses. So I have the load balancer and I have 2 application servers right here. And these 2 are identical, and they run a Ubuntu 64-bit, 16.04, I think. And I have everything set up with applications on them. I'm going to go through them in the next tutorial. So I have these virtual boxes right here, and I've also, in my terminal here, I have SSH'd into these servers. So in here I'm on server 1, here I have server 2, and also here I have the load balancer, because it makes it easier for me to copy paste stuff if I need to do that. So that's why I have SSH into them. And also obviously because this is how you would do it in a working environment. So let's say that you have these servers on AWS or DigitalOcean or some equivalent of that. So yeah, that's the basic setup of everything, and hope you guys liked it, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment if anything is unclear, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.